صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hope you are doing well. Thank you for joining us today for our first session with Sheikh Abu Sumayya. Inshallah, we have Sheikh with us for the entire month of May for a total of 5 sessions, with tonight being the first one on May 2nd. And the plan is, inshallah, to keep these sessions going on a weekly basis. So, inshallah, we'll be having the part 2 on next week, May 9th, then the part 3 on May 16th, and then we'll skip a week and then have our last session with Sheikh Abu Sumayya on May 30th. Inshallah, Sheikh will be giving an intro about what his topic will be, so I'll leave that with him, and then he'll also talk about the book that we'll be covering. But inshallah, the aim is that to cover topics covering things like what is a Muslim identity in today's world? What does an Islamic family look like? How do you find or achieve your mission or purpose as a Muslim without compromising our faith living here in the West? So these are all important questions that Sheikh, inshallah, will be addressing in these next few sessions. I would advise that you all follow along by scanning the QR code on the screen. So that has the first few chapters of the book that Sheikh will be covering and starting off with tonight. And then inshallah, we'll be taking it from there. So let's inshallah hand over the mic to the Sheikh Abu Sumayya with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الغوي الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الميامين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yeah, so the question or the title of this series that we came up with Al-Mahdi Youth and myself together is the Malaise of Modernity. Malaise means illness, disenchantment, unhappiness. And this is based on a book which was essentially a series of lectures which then became a book, first published in 1991. So imagine, this is a while back now, right? By Charles Taylor. He's a famous Canadian philosopher and thinker who gave something called the CBC Massey Lecture Series. So for those who follow CBC at all, I don't even know how much this generation probably even does that, but I do. CBC has something called the Massey Lectures. The Massey Lectures are the most famous lecture series in Canada or maybe even in North America, where somebody really brilliant, really incredible, really intelligent, really remarkable is invited every year. If you get invited there, you're someone extremely important to give the Massey Lecture Series. People like Martin Luther King Jr. have given the Massey Lectures. People like, other people as well. Northrop Frye. Anyway, so Charles Taylor was one of the people that gave this Massey Lecture Series in the 90s. This was a time in which people weren't really thinking of this, and he was asking of one principal question, which was, what does happiness entail in our age today? So where were human beings and where are they now, and why does there seem to be this sense of angst or this sense of uncertainty and this sense of lack of belonging? This is a principal question that he tries to answer. It's a very short book. It's like 100 pages, and the print is pretty big. It's very simple. It's very easy to read. The actual book is 800 pages, but this is the kind of introduction to some of his ideas, which then became a much larger book, and we're not obviously reading that. But what we're doing, we're just looking at a few pages of this book, because I think it's very important. It's very important because 99% of the issues that he raises in this book are issues that are plaguing and confronting contemporary Muslim communities today. And one of those first issues, and we put a list of topics that are going to be covered in these nights, in these days, right? And the first of those issues is that of identity. In Arabic, we call this huwiyat. Okay? That it's so principle, it's so absolute and so principle, right? Which is huwiyah, right? Huwiyah, or it's just identity. Huwiyah. So what is that identity? That's a principal question that he begins to ask here. And he says that what happens is when that identity becomes fractured and you're not really sure what it is exactly, you can't really put your finger on it, that's when you start having this malaise, the sense of angst, the sense of discomfort, the sense of crisis even. And that comes from something known as the splitting of horizons. What do I mean by that? That for the human race, up to, for like 90% or 99, 95% of its existence has had a singular horizon by which shapes their life, an outlook, a viewpoint, a direction, a roadmap. That crumbles, and it's now in ashes. And now people are told, you create your own roadmap. The problem is that human beings don't really know how to do that, because can human beings individually create their own metaphysical systems, their own religious systems, their own philosophies, their own way of thinking? Can each individual human being do that? They cannot. It's not possible. And thus, they're in this place that Charles Taylor says is the malaise of modernity. Because they bought into this promise of free market capitalism, this promise of prosperity. But with that prosperity comes a very, very profound lack of certainty. There is no longer a horizon, an ufuq, by which to anchor themselves to. So it's a double-edged sword. This is what he brings up. He's not here to say it's all bad. He's simply saying that human beings have to acknowledge that this is very much a double-edged sword. So the question of identity from an Islamic point of view is absolutely fundamental. It's something that we have to begin to answer. And Imam Zain al-Abidin in Risalatul Hukuk begins in the most important way. How does the Imam say? He says, وَاعْلَمْ رَحِمَكَ اللَّهِ أَنَّ لِلَّهِ عَلَيْكَ حُقُوقًا مُحِيطَةً بِكَ فِي كُلِّ حَرَكَةٍ تَحَرَّكْتَهَا أو سَكَنَةٍ سَكَنْتَهَا. He says that in every movement or every stationary moment, meaning in every moment of your life, you shall know that God has a series of encompassing rights upon you. This is the very opening of Risalatul Hukuk, where the Imam is speaking to Abu Hamza al-Thamali and beginning to tell Abu Hamza al-Thamali what are these rights between God and His creation. O manzilatin nazaltaha, O jarihatin qabaltaha, O alatin tasarrafta biha, ba'duha akbaru min ba'd. Meaning one thing is connected to another. Wa akbaru hukukillah alayka. And the greatest of all of these things if you want to think how one thing is connected to another, this is so brilliant what the Imam is saying here. Whether something is moving or whether something is stationary. Whether it is a place that you have settled or something that you have making use of. Something that you are utilizing. Whether it be a person or a thing, it has a right upon you, you have a right upon it. There's a relationship between you and it. Everything has a preordained haq and relationship. Everything. It's absolutely philosophically brilliant the way the Imam opens this discussion. But then, see, now no human beings would not neglect that. But what ties all of it together? This is the important point that the Imam brings up here. Right? What does he say? He says, وَأَكْبَرُ حُقُوقِ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ مَا أَوْجَبْتَهُ لِنَفْسِهِ. And the greatest of rights, and the greatest is the rights of God upon you, that He has made incumbent for Himself from His right. وَهُوَ أَصْلُ الْحُقُوقِ. This is the origin of all rights. This is the important point here. The origin of all rights. That everything functions according to this, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus that identity or that huwiyah is indispensably connected to Him. In everything that we do, the Imam says. Everything. Moving or stationary. In whatever form it is. Right? That is the horizon that ties everything together. Now, what Taylor says is that this was the mode of existence for human beings for 99% of their history. In different ways, in different forms, in different religious traditions, however you want to describe it. So what happens is, modernity comes along, and we're not going to go through all of that now, and it says there is no origin of all rights. Or rather, there is origin of all rights, but it's not Allah. You are its origin. Not God. So this relationship is now severed between the two. You decide. Why? Because you live in a free market capital economy. This is the very product of free market capitalism. Because you get to choose what you want to purchase from the shelf, thus you get to choose how you want to identify yourself, what that identity means to you. For us as Muslims, that is permanently inseparable from God, not because it's the morally right thing to do only. That's a secondary issue, because it's logical. Because we believe in this concept of a chain of being. This is what Taylor brings up in the first 2-3 pages. It's every page of this book is absolutely mind-blowing, because he condenses concepts that are so profound in just 1 or 2 pages. Because we believe we're a part of a chain of being, and Allah, God, is at the end of that chain of being. And thus that identity is always inextricably linked to Him. It cannot be severed from Him. It's not a moral question at this moment in time. It's simply a logical one. It's a logical question. It's not necessarily a moral question. And thus the Quran would tell us to live any other life is unthinkable. It's equivalent of leaving your house and saying, I'm a cow, or I'm a dog, or just completely being so ridiculously stupid, so ridiculously insane. That's the Quran compares it to insanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on many occasions compares such an ideology to somehow sever oneself from that. It's not even a moral question. I mean, the immorality is a second part of it. It's just complete insanity. It's complete foolishness. It just makes no sense. It's unfathomable to do it. And it was unfathomable for 99% of human history. Regardless whether you're in First Nations, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Hindu. Regardless. And what Taylor brings up in the very beginning is that we have to understand how free market capitalism, the idea of a consumer-led economy, the idea of material prosperity being directly linked to free market capitalism, meaning you have a choice to buy what you want from the market. This whole notion, this is where neoliberalism is linked, right? I don't want to use too many words to confuse the matter. Let's just say simply your purchasing power to purchase what you want. These two are inextricably linked to each other. And it's not that Islam denies the concept of a free market economy. No. Free market economy meaning anyone can open up their shop and let the best person win. The government doesn't get to set prices everywhere, right? To a certain extent, we believe in that. We believe that people have a right to own things, they have a right to sell things. Yes, there are Islamic laws that kind of oversee that. For example, we have laws of contracts. You can't, for example, in Al-Makasib al-Muharrama of Sheikh al-Ansari, there's a whole chapter, I don't know if it's chapter 24, 25, I don't remember which chapter it was again. I was just reading this chapter with Sayyid Fadl Bahr al-Ulum a few days ago in Najaf al-Ashraf actually, in which there's very clear, for example, it's illegal, it's haram rather, to bid up something inappropriately. For example, to get someone in there to say, oh, I like this product, so that the other person starts paying more for it, for example, right? So free market capitalism, even for us, is not unlimited, right? It has certain rules, certain moral rules attached to it. But the ayah from Surah Fussilat 53 kind of encompasses this whole discussion where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, that we shall show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ وَلَمْ يَكْفِي بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. Is it not sufficient that God is a witness over everything? So that huwiyat, or that identity which tells me who I am, is very much connected to what now? That God is a witness over everything. Over everything. This is from Surah Fussilat. The ayah number is 53. This is a very important part. So the origin is God, but it's not enough that. And he's a witness. So there's this notion of witnessing now. So he's not only the origin of everything, but he sees everything. Because he's a creator, if he's the originator of everything, then he, in all logical consequence or logical ramifications, is also a witness over everything. That makes sense. In the laha, right? That's surely annahu ala kulli shay'in shaheed, or inna Allah ala kulli shay'in shaheed. That God witnesses everything. So nothing can escape his sight. Nothing can escape that moment of witnessing. And thus that identity of who we are, who am I as a person, can never be disconnected from that. Because it is not a violation of nature. It's a very violation of existence, because there cannot be existence without God. That's in a theistic framework. And then Islam would take this further and tell us, well, no, now that's not the full story. You have something that God has put within you that, well, then how does all this work? How does this function? How does all this play out? There's something within you that connects you to that origin. There's something within you. Call it nature, call it natural law, call it fitrah. People have different names for things. The Quran calls it fitrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it fitrah. But different religions have different words for these things. I'm not saying they're all the same, but I'm saying that these are universal concepts. That there's something within you that draws you towards that. And to deafen that and step on that and push it away and silence it or ignore it is to your own detriment. And this is what Taylor is saying again. This is the malaise of modernity. The sickness, the disenchantment, the depression, the loneliness of modernity. This is the problem. And that's why for us as Muslims, we cannot treat the mind without the soul. We cannot. It is a complete fallacy. It is a complete, utter fallacy. It is impossible. Not only for Muslims, for anyone of any serious religious disposition, it is impossible. And this is what Taylor begins with in the first 7 pages, which you can look at on the QR code. Let's go through the reading. Okay. So he opens the book. See, I didn't have access to the whole book. The U of T only gives like 30 pages or something. We have to figure out a way to get a PDF of this. One of you can be resourceful and find out how we can get a PDF of it, okay? Because, I couldn't find it through U of T library. They only give like a few pages. Yeah. So he begins here at the beginning of the book, page 1 and page 2. He says, the worries I will be talking about are very familiar. No one needs to be reminded of them. They are discussed, bemoaned, challenged, and argued against all the time in all sorts of media. He said, that sounds like a reason not to talk about them further. But I believe that this great familiarity hides bewilderment that we don't really understand these changes that worry us. This is really interesting here. What is he saying? Taylor is saying here, sometimes we talk so much about things, yada, 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 but we don't really understand what it is we're talking about. We don't understand the underpinnings, the machinery behind the scenes. And we talk about something thinking that we know what we're talking about. In reality, we don't. We don't understand what this is, this monster or this beast that we're discussing, which is modernity or postmodernity, whatever you want to call it, a world in which that connection is severed. He says we don't really understand it. It needs a conversation. And a radio show host is not going to replace that. And I would say the same thing, that someone coming on the minbar and just saying, oh, West bad, all kafirs go to hell and this and that and going home, and the only good place is the Middle East and this and that. That's not going to do anything. I mean, 99% of those people have never even probably looked at Charles Taylor or know what the underpinnings of modernity are to even have a critical conversation about it. It's rhetoric. It's rhetoric. It's no different than, someone listened to Joe Rogan or Seth Rogen, or I don't know what his name is, something Rogan, isn't he? He's really famous, apparently. Gets like millions for each podcast he does. Joe Rogan, what's his name? Joe Rogan. And some people think they're smart because they listen to these podcasts. There's nothing intelligent, really, that's revealed in these things. It's just people talking about things that they can barely understand, and they're in sound bites. And this is exactly what Taylor is saying, is that we talk about these things so much, but we don't truly understand them. Right? So people say, for example, we want to build the mosque to protect our youth. But do they really understand what that means? What are they protecting them from? Can they have a deeper conversation about that? This is what Taylor is saying. And Taylor is saying, so it may seem on the surface to be really simple, but it's not simple. It's very complicated and it's very multifaceted. So that's the first point on page 2 that he makes, which I think is very, very important for us, right? He says, the changes defining modernity are both well-known and very perplexing, and that is why it's worth talking more about them. And he begins by saying that the first source of worry is individualism. Individualism. Now, this is tied again to this issue of identity. So he says the first worry is individualism. Individualism. Again here, the individualism that he brings up here is not the individualism of saying that people don't have rights. Risalatul Hukuk of Imam Zain al-Abidin makes it very clear that people have rights. Children have rights. Parents have rights, husbands have rights, wives have rights, animals have rights, people have rights, friends have rights over each other. Yes, people do possess individual rights. But each right is understood within the sum of the whole. And that is determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's determined by God. So that individualism is governed and understood and structured through a divine relationship. That's the main important thing. Yes?
Quick question, Sheikh. So you're saying that all of our rights are based upon God's rights on us, or just God in general? Like all of our rights are based upon just God's existence?
God, that everything returns to him. Okay. Right? Why? Why? Because he witnesses everything. Because of the witnessing. Because Allah is Shaheed. He's a witness. Because he's a witness over everything, our individual rights are witnessed upon by God. Right? That's why that part of Fussilat 53, وَأَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ, is very important. So yes, we have a right to own property. Islam gives us a right. Islam gives us a right to be rich. No problem. You can own 10 cars, 15 cars, 100 cars. Nobody can come and tell you that. It's a big problem. And even the state taking away property from you, there are very limited circumstances where that can occur. Very limited circumstances. And even at the time of Amir al-Mu'minin, the time of the Prophet, we see that people owned individual lands, owned individual properties. Nobody can come and say, you can't own 10 houses, you can't own 15 houses, you can't own 15 farms. No. People can't come and tell you that. You have a right. As long as, of course, you're not owning farms and taking water away from people and diverting water, it starts becoming a different issue. Right? We don't believe in this idea of state-controlled property, for example, in and of itself, although that's a very long discussion. So the individual has rights. We're not against that individualism, and that's not what Taylor is pointing to here. Taylor is pointing to an individualism that is disconnected from its source, from its asl, And he says that this form of individualism informs, perpetuates, and animates almost every source or every outlet of human interaction in this world, which is a godless world, a disenchanted world. And then he says that as we were rushing to develop these economies of scale, we never stopped to think, what would the consequences be for all of this? Where does this train end? We never stopped to think about it. He did. He did, and that's what he lays out in this book. And that's why this book is so important to read. And there is nothing like it in Arabic, because Muslims haven't really thought about it. Muslims have just kind of onboarded all of these things because of their colonialism, because of their own inferiority complexes, because of their own issues, their own poverty, their own ignorance, for whatever reasons it is, because they lost the Second World War, the First World War, the Ottomans and all that. There's a whole history of why Muslims don't understand these concepts generally. They don't think about these concepts, or maybe it's a luxury as well to think about these concepts itself. When you're not colonized and under a gun, maybe you can think about these concepts. Yes?
Like, what was like the breaking point in history where that link was like cut? Because as you mentioned, like that link was there for thousands of years, or like a very long time.
Yeah.
So, what was that?
Well, there wasn't one point. It was a series of events, right? It's a series of events that took place that precipitated the cutting of that umbilical cord. Literally, it's a spiritual it's an umbilical cord between the human being and God, right? And that was the wars of religion. Part of it, right, is that there were so many wars, especially fought in Europe, between Christians themselves. That was part of it. The excesses of the church were another part of it. Within Europe, there were certain discussions going on that about art and science and about other forms of human flourishing. I really think a lot of this had to do with the crimes of the Catholic Church. I won't say crimes, that's a very strong word to say, but certain doctrines of the Catholic Church that may have been understood in a certain way. So, for example, the Catholic Church stated that priests can't marry, for example, right? There's this idea of shunning away from all materialism, living a life of complete poverty, not marrying, not having children, so on and so forth, right? And so there was this internal struggle within the Christians themselves. And then the Reformation coming about. So this has a long history. We could say it kind of began about 400 or 500 years ago, and then just kind of continued due to a certain number of reasons, right? As I said, the wars of religion were one of them. But however, recent research has said that some of this may be a myth. Some of this may be a myth, this idea that the church was always to blame for everything. They're the bad person. They're evil. They're the ones that are, that caused all of this to occur. Recent research, such as the research of David Bentley Hart, in his excellent book called Atheistic Delusions. It's one of the most superb books I've ever read on atheism, called The Atheist Delusions. It's an absolutely superb book, published by Yale, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. So it's an excellent book. I mean, pretty much everything Bentley Hart writes is excellent, but he says that a lot of this is nonsense. It's just not all of it is historically accurate. And there are other causes and other reasons, such as it could be the development of one piece of technology, which then leads to something, which leads to something, which leads to something, which invariably changes human life in such a way that causes them to be separate from one another, more so, and causes them to have this false sense of independence from God. So I would say it's pronged or two kind of faced issue. On one hand, you have the internal problems within Christianity. Again, it's not our problems. These are Christian problems. It's, again, Muslims are onboarding something that's not in their religion. This is the whole problem that's going on here. But Muslims are so ignorant and illiterate in so many parts of the world, especially after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, that they don't understand any of this, right? And they just want to be white, basically. By white, I don't mean color. I mean Western. But I mean white man's burden. There's a whole history to that, right? As to why they colonized and enslaved and so on and so forth. It's not to do with, I'm not talking about color per se here. And so that's part of it. And then the second part of this is simply technology and the Industrial Revolution. And people moving from rural to urban towns. In urban centers, they began congregating in close urban centers. Women began working in those urban centers. There began to be mixing between the genders. One thing leads to the next, and and you've got a full-blown party going on. And what ends up there is people kind of say, hey, I got money, I don't need to go to church. I'm rich, I got money, I built this factory, selling tons of clothes out of it. I'm going to miss this Sunday from church. I can't close on Sunday. Or maybe instead on this Sunday, I'm going to go to the countryside with my friends. I'm not going to go to church. Because I have money, I can do it. I can do what I want. I have financial freedom to do it. So people began doing this, and then one person saw their neighbor doing it, the other neighbor saw their other neighbor doing it, the other neighbor saw their neighbor doing it. I started saying, I don't know, this God stuff, we'll believe in it, but I don't think we really need to go to church anymore. And slowly, it's a mixture of the church's own problems, mixed on one hand and on the other hand with technology. So is the problem only with technology? No, the problem is with not being aware of how to handle it, of what it is, of its effects on your life, and the systems that underpin it. Yes, Mustafa? So, I don't know if I've explained myself. It's quite complex. There's internal problems in the church, and then there's just the kind of things that happen in human society as new discoveries are made, new technologies are invented, and they have an inextricable effect on human life. And this is also a consequence of adopting new technologies without regulation, without philosophical, spiritual consideration of their effects. Everything from production to electricity, to whatever it may be, right? Yeah.
So being aware of these ideas from kind of your life, what are some of the social implications that you're seeing in the various kind of social environments that you're in, whether it be Muslim or non-Muslim?
I think just a widespread spiritual ignorance, a widespread ignorance of the idea that they don't have responsibilities towards God. The notion that they are invincible. Invincibility comes about through technology and wealth. Simple as that. Poor people tend to be more religious. They tend to be more God-fearing. That's what Hadith in Al-Kafi tells us from the Prophet, that the first to enter heaven will be the poor. They will certainly be the first to enter heaven. They had less to lose, and they still thank God for what they had. So this sense of invincibility, right? Wealth and technology bring about this false sense of security, this sense of invincibility. Absolutely. It is. It's a kind of arrogance, self-entitlement. And what Taylor says, again, maybe this is just because I've been reading the book and teaching, I guess, for almost 15 years, these books. But his point is that this has been talked about so much that people say, why are you talking about it again? He's talking about it because people don't understand it. Right? It's when something is so ubiquitous, it is so ever-present in our lives, and we don't stop to ask ourselves about its deeper meaning, we just onboard it. So technology and wealth have extraordinary impacts on human life. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. They will change human life in a way that is almost irreversible. And this is in two forms, right? This will come in two forms here. Two forms. Let me know, what time is Salah today? We have what, 2 minutes? 8:35, so we'll wrap up in a second here. So this will come in two forms, okay? Two forms, all right? Something known as ontological materialism. I'll explain these words, okay? And moral materialism. These are very dangerous. And Taylor talks about this at length, in the Malaise of Modernity. When these two come together, now you've got a big problem. Ontological materialism is nature. Everything's about nature, not God. Right? What was I watching? Actually, I was listening to I was just came from Dubai this morning, so I was listening to they have this thing on Emirates, podcast or radio show or something. So they were interviewing the general manager of one of the best resorts in all of Middle East. It's in Oman. It's called it's called Six Senses in Zigby Bay in Oman. It's an absolutely stunning place. And the lady just kept talking about the health and wellness, and it's beautiful, and it is stunning. I want to go and visit there. It's absolutely one of the wonders of the world, right? It's like dolphins and stuff. It's in the mountains of Oman. But nowhere did she mention about God's beauty, the Jamal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She just kept talking about beauty and mental health and centering yourself and health, and you can walk in your slippers to feel comfortable and disconnect from the world and all this feel-good stuff, right? But nowhere did she, and about nature and sustainability. She spoke about sustainability, how it's a self-sustaining, they have an organic farm and all that and the other. This is known as ontological materialism, meaning that the world is a closed loop. Nowhere did it mention the one who has endowed all of this, that it gives you an opportunity to turn to God. It gives you an opportunity to see his wonders. It gives you an opportunity to sing his praise, to call out his name. No. She just spoke at length about how, nature's beauty. This is known as ontological materialism, which is the default position of the free market economy. It's a default position of 99% of every outlet of human experience. Whether it be in the Muslim world, the so-called Muslim world, I won't say 99% in the Muslim world, but a large percentage in the Muslim world, and 99% of experiences in the non-Muslim majority world. It's ontological materialism. Everything is in a closed loop. Nothing can break that loop. And if you were to mention it, it's God's beauty, you're nothing but Lindsey Graham or, Donald Trump, right? They would call you a wacko, right? You'd be sidelined immediately, right? Because oh my God, it must be some kind of crazy fundamentalist religious person to mention that. What does business have to do with that? Why would you mention that? The second one is moral materialism. What is moral materialism? Simply put, you determine what life means since you make your own morals. If it ain't illegal, go and do it. That's moral materialism. That's how 99% of people live. Do what you want. If it's not illegal. For example, this whole story of Ashley Madison. For those who've seen that documentary or heard about it, I don't know if watching the documentary is a very good idea, but the whole point is it's about this company. I read about it. This company that created ways for people to commit adultery. And they made billions of dollars doing it. Billions of dollars. Can you imagine? It's a Canadian company, actually. Went bankrupt and then was repurchased later on. This is moral materialism. Right? They were based out of Toronto, so no Canadians can't claim, this is a Toronto-based company. And the guy who was running it, it was a scam anyways. He was doing a lot of illegal things and all of that, of course. Serves him right. May Allah's lana to be on him for this kind of stuff. But the point is that this is moral materialism. When was this happening? In the 90s. The very time where Taylor was saying there was a debate about these things. Now today, there's no debate about these things at all. In the 90s, there still was a debate. Now there's no more debate. But this is moral materialism, meaning that there isn't any God-driven value in your decision. No. It's your decision. That's what matters. God has nothing to do with that. Because the free market economy cannot function with that God as a part of it. This is what Taylor says. The free market economy can't function truly. The free market economy, in order to keep running on the GDP growth, has to have these two ingredients for it to work. At least in the way that they have thought of it to be. Friedman and all those economists. Is it Friedman? Yeah. One from Chicago, right? University of Chicago, what's his name? Milton Friedman, yeah. Friedman. So in order for that to work, these two have to be in place. So that you can be rich. With this. And if you want to do it without this, then you're against the machine. And when you're up against the machine, you better be ready for a struggle. It's not going to be easy. The powers that be have designed the system in a certain way. And it's to their benefit. And that's why any person who stands up the face of that system, they will try to crush them. By they, I don't mean a specific person, I just mean the proponents of that system, which obviously is nothing other than Shaitan himself as their Lord. So we'll talk more about this, but today's discussion was about identity. That identity, beginning with Risalatul Hukuk, as Imam Zain al-Abidin has laid out, as lying ultimately the origin of all rights is in God. And he forms the very bedrock of our horizon, the very direction of our outlook. And then everything flows from there. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله طيبين الطاهرين.